The Netflix rando movie was getting quite literally 5 to 10 times the audience that the Star Wars show was. And most importantly, and here's the kicker, on like a third or less of the budget, or maybe a sixth of the budget if it was a rom-com or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's the difference. This is why Netflix is turning a 25% profit margin on its business. This is why Netflix has a market cap of $400 billion, over $400 billion, compared to Disney's $200 billion.
Renegade Online.
And that's exactly what we're talking about. The problem with Andor is, for whatever reason, my computer doesn't want me to sign into X right now. I've got to enter two-factor authentication to get into X all of a sudden. I guess it kicked me out. But the point is that exactly what Nick just said. What they're trying to do with Andor is to trick people into thinking that the show is going to do better, or is doing better when it releases, than it actually is. And when you talk about Luminate and Nielsen and how bad Star Wars has absolutely failed on Disney Plus, especially when you juxtapose it with these outrageous budgets. Okay? Mando season 1 and 2, when you have Favreau in full control, and Favreau is a guy that likes to really run a tight ship, and he created the volume technology to do it in, and they were able to do those shows on a relatively stringent budget, right? We heard anywhere from 100 to 150 million a season for that. They really dialed it in. And again, that sounds like a lot, and it is, but when you compare it to Andor and Acolyte and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Skeleton Crew and all these things, you start realizing that, okay, especially the ones they shoot in the UK, and they're spending almost $300 million to do Secret Invasion that nobody watched for Marvel on Disney Plus. Yeah. And then another $300 million, $300 million for the Acolyte, which comparably nobody watched. And we've brought up time and time again, we've actually showed the data on Luminate and on Netflix that a random new Netflix movie, like any week, like whatever week the Acolyte debuted with 2 episodes and 90 minutes of watchable time. Same thing with Skeleton Crew, debuted with 2 or 3 episodes and about 90 minutes of watchable time. The random average new film with nobody of importance in it, not connected to any major IP, that debuted the same week as a Star Wars show. Netflix was at the top of the chart. You couldn't find a Star Wars show. The Netflix rando movie was getting quite literally 5 to 10 times the audience that the Star Wars show was. And most importantly, and here's the kicker, on like a third or less of the budget, or maybe a sixth of the budget if it was a rom-com or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's the difference. This is why Netflix is turning a 25% profit margin on its business. This is why Netflix has a market cap of $400 billion, over $400 billion, compared to Disney's $200 billion. And Netflix doesn't own a single theme park, doesn't own a piece of IP apart from Stranger Things, doesn't own the real property, the massive cruise ships, 10, 15, $20 billion worth of cruise ships that Disney owns, doesn't own $50 billion, $100 billion worth of resorts and properties and hotels, and another $50 billion worth of theme park land. They own none of that. But somehow Netflix, on $40 billion a year of gross revenue, is bringing home $10 billion in operating income or profit. Disney is bringing home $90 billion a year in total revenues and less than $12 billion a year in profit. Netflix is making almost as much money as Disney is with less than half the sales. That's how crazy it is. And that's the difference between Disney Plus shows and Netflix shows. And this is why one is doing really, really well and the other one is sucking eggs.
So when the Andor watch time minutes come out, I guess we just need to divide that by 3 every single time.
This is it. This is what I was talking about. How do you take the worst performing, big budget streaming originals, and this goes for Star Wars and Marvel on D+, and make it look like they're competitive? Because up until this point, they really haven't been. Landman was putting out a 1-hour episode each week on Paramount Plus, which has half the number of subscribers as Disney Plus. Landman is clocking in over 1 billion minutes watched on Luminate every week they were dropping an episode. 1.2, 1.3 billion minutes watched. Skeleton Crew couldn't break into the top 10. In the 10th place, was like 220 million, like 1/5 of Landman. Landman has finished its season. Ready for this? Over a month ago. It's been 5 weeks since the season finale of Landman came out. It's still rocking 500 million minutes a week on Luminate. That's the difference. And I tell you right now, Landman didn't cost no $300 million. But here's what they're doing with Andor. Assume it goes down the road like most of these Disney shows. And being a little generous because it's Andor and they did have longer episodes, I think. But let's just say the average episode length is about 45 minutes. The Acolyte average was like 30 minutes, okay? Let's say these are 45. Let's say that each week they're going to drop 3 episodes, which according to the rumor mill out there, that's exactly what they're doing. And I believe it because by doing this, they're going to drop 2 hours of content each week. They can't get it done with 30 minutes. They can't get it done with 45 minutes. They have not been able to get it done with an hour, and they have not even been able to get it done with 90 minutes of available runtime on season or series premieres like Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, pardon me. So what do we do now? Andor, remember, until the Acolyte came out, was the worst performing show on Disney+. Andor was the worst performing show, well, at least for Star Wars. Then came the Acolyte, then came Skeleton Crew and bailed Andor out. So you're going to release 2 hours a week with the hope that you can maybe, hopefully, get a good showing on the Nielsen and Luminate charts and actually chart in the top 10. So they're gaming the system. They're basically manipulating how they're releasing it in order to drive that. Because we do give deference to shows that are released in a binge model, like on Netflix, versus an episodic release. And that's why when I compare releases on Disney Plus, that's why I said earlier a Netflix movie, right? Because a 90-minute premiere of a Star Wars show should have a good comparative metric to a 90-minute movie on Netflix that came out the same week, right? It's the same amount of watch time that's available, trying to hit a similar demographic in most cases, age-wise. One did way better than the other, and it's always the Netflix movie. That's why they're trying to cheat this with Andor.
You know, what's funny to me about that is they don't care about the customer consumption patterns.
No.
It's like, no, we're just trying to game the metrics.
They care about the perception of the customer, though, which is why they're trying to game the metrics.
Well, you know, part of the reason, Mark, is that we had heard, especially, it was right before Skeleton Crew came out. This was after Acolyte, I believe. And we had heard through a friend of ours, very much in the know, and he's been on the show before to talk about it, KMG. We call him Grits, or Kiss My Grits. That's his nickname online. Very, very knowledgeable on the advertising sales, the Hollywood television and film advertising stuff. He had heard, and I totally believe him, because he's never been wrong yet, that Disney Plus advertisers were pulling contracts. They were bailing on Disney Plus because Disney Plus was consistently and significantly under-delivering audiences to their ads. So Disney was basically having to cut refund checks, and then they weren't renewing the contracts. They were bailing. And that was before Skeleton Crew happened, which was even worse. So you got to imagine, like, this is how bad Disney Plus is struggling. And one of the big reasons for it is the failure of Kathleen Kennedy Star Wars. I mean, they haven't had, again, we talked earlier about, you know, the guys that brought Kennedy to the dance when Andre was talking about Frank Marshall. It's the same thing here. The Mandalorian, the one huge unmitigated success they've had was Jon Favreau, the guy who built the architecture for the MCU. And then Favreau kind of pieced out, and we all have seen what's happened since then. Hadn't been pretty, and I don't know how well this movie is going to go off next year.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.